I would like to welcome everyone today to the Mirowitz Center program, the American Jewish Hour, a glimpse into St. Louis Jewish history with Diane Everman. Welcome, Diane. Diane is an archivist for the St. Louis Kaplan Feldman Holocaust and also an archivist for the Taylor family and Enterprise Holdings. We welcome Diane back today from some other programs that we have done in the past, and we are so excited to have you speak with us again today, and this is a really fun topic. Diane, thank you so much, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, all right. Good afternoon. I almost said morning, but then I realized we're past noon, so I have to say afternoon. And give me just a second. I'm going to share my screen, so give me just a minute, and we'll see how this works out. Oops.
All right.
There we go.
Yep.
Now, can you guys see the first screen?
Looks good. Looks good.
Excellent. Okay. All right. Here we go. You are listening to the American Jewish Hour, a program of variety and recorded music brought to you by the Committee for the American Jewish Hour in cooperation with the Jewish War Veterans of the United States. This is KXLW, Clayton, Missouri. That is how they started the program for the American Jewish Hour in 1947. So I thought I would just share with you how the program started. Of course, I believe the announcer was a man, but you got the general idea. The creative genius behind this program was Robert Lurie. And I've given you some of the things that he was associated with here. Obviously, the American Jewish Hour. Some of you might remember the program, I hope. If not, I will share a little bit more about it with you, or actually quite a bit about it with you. Robert Lurie was also, a lot of people know him because of being the founder of Brentwood Travel. So hopefully you use their services. But he also did, after the American Jewish Hour, he did a program on KPLR TV called Expose. So you might have known him from that. Very much involved, I should say, with the Jewish community in a variety of things, including the JCRC, the Jewish Community Relations Council, as an executive director, and the Israel Bonds. So very well known in the community. He knew a lot of people, and that actually helped, I think, with this program. I believe, before I forget it, that there are some members of the family who are also on this call. So if later on you have questions specifically about Bob Lurie, then, and I can't answer them, which I may or may not be able to, then they might be able to help you out on that. So the program started on KXLW, as I had mentioned, and it ran starting in March of 1947, and it went through 44, and then it was on WIL, another AM station, 54 to 55, and then it ended up on WEW from 55 to 58. So 47 to 58 basically is the time period we're talking about. And if you think about it, there was an awful lot going on in St. Louis and in the world, and everything from the creation of the state of Israel to various other things were going on. The program, as you can see, hopefully with the promotional brochure on the right-hand side, the idea was to create and present an educational and service program that was entertaining. And as Al Fleischman once wrote, that it was also meant so that the average member of the St. Louis Jewish community would get something out of it, as well as what he called the Christian community. So non-Jews who would also enjoy the program because there would be lots of things going on. And hopefully it would appeal to a wide variety of individuals. If you think about a radio program, it's not visual, so you have to do everything so it captivates people. It grabs their attention through voices, through inflection, through music, all sorts of things. And that's exactly what this program did. It took them a week to put the whole thing together, which is not surprising at all, because they had to research the things that they were going to include. They had to write the script. They had to decide on which music that they were going to play and then get it ready, because this was not cued music on tape. These were actually phonograph albums that they were playing. So they had to get that all ready to go. There had to be who among the cast was going to be there for what things they were going to do. They had to go through rehearsals, and then they had to actually put the show on the air, which took a lot of time and a lot of people. And I'm sure it was a lot of, it was not an easy thing to do, but from the couple of pictures that I've seen, it actually looked like quite a fun thing to do for most people, for most of the cast and the crew. The idea of this program was to draw as many people to it as possible, and they did a really good job about it. The only problem that they had early on was its funding. When it originally started, oops, I'm going to back up for just a second. When it originally started, it was funded primarily through or by a group of Jewish businessmen. And then they realized very soon that they were going to have to go beyond that. So they started soliciting for funds, and they created a men's and a women's committee for the American Jewish Hour. So you could join that and you could become a member of that committee for $3 a year. I mean, we're talking big bucks there, but every little bit helped. And then there would be support from other people who would just make a donation, as you can see here from this promotional brochure. In our collection, which is really large as collections go, it's about 39 cubic feet. So that's a sizable collection. A large part of it are the actual scripts that were used. We also have 5 cubic feet of books that they used to research everything that they produced in the program. We have about 8 cubic feet of phonograph albums. So these are really, really fascinating. They're also extremely fragile, and it makes me very nervous every time they get moved. And then we have these treasures. These are transcription discs. In the early days of radio, at least of this program, they didn't tape the program on reel-to-reel or audio cassette or anything like that, and it certainly wasn't digital. And instead, they actually recorded it on these transcription discs. They look sort of like phonograph albums, LPs, but they don't play on a record player. It's a special device. And then they would actually record it onto these. This one that you're seeing right here is actually one segment from one show. So each show would usually have several of these transcription discs. And if somebody someplace else recorded something for them to play on the American Jewish Hour, they had to send these through the mail. And you can imagine the problems with that. I wish we had all of the transcription discs. We do not. We do have a sizable number of them. We have about 120 of them, but that does not cover all the shows, not even each show completely. But they're treasures nonetheless, and our goal is to someday have enough money and time to actually transcribe them so that people can listen to them. I mentioned about the idea that this was supposed to be, the idea behind this was to make it extremely popular, something that people wanted to listen to. And in 1948, they actually won a Billboard award. So you might think of Billboard as music awards, but in this time for radio programs, they had contests all the time for different types of programs. And the American Jewish Hour won it in 1948. And let me just tell you, one of the big things that they did in 48 was an appeal for the United Jewish Appeal, right? So this was a big fundraiser for not the program, but for Israel. And let me just read you the lineup of the people who participated in this. Now, I don't think that these people were here in St. Louis, but they actually participated in the program. So see if you recognize any of these names. John Garfield, Danny Thomas, Eddie Cantor, Robert Montgomery, Raymond Massey, Burgess Meredith, Paul Mooney, Ray Milland, and Dorothy McGuire. I mean, this is really a who's who of people from the world of Hollywood even at the time, and they all participated in this appeal in 48. So in its second year on the air, it won a pretty prestigious award, a Billboard, which was really quite something. So this is the advertisement for the very first one, March 2nd, 1947, and you can see it was on KXLW. And it's a community family show. And the idea was that everything had to be family oriented, nothing that would cause anybody to raise an eyebrow on. And you can also see some of the sponsors from the program. Here is Northwest Baking Company, the Raskus Dairy, Schinberg's 20th Century Supermarkets. Deals with another topic which is near and dear to my heart, which is food and foodways in St. Louis, but maybe a future program on that. The Globe Democrat did a little blurb about the program in March of 47, talking about that who sponsored it and everything, and then mentions that Robert Lurie will be the master of ceremonies, and it will feature Jewish songs, wit, and philosophy. That is an understatement. There were so many things that they covered in this program that obviously the Globe Democrat couldn't put everything in it, but it was just an amazing program, and it covered all sorts of things. And I'm just going to show you some of the kinds of items that were included. And remember, this is not a visual program, right? They had to do all of these things. Think about you not seeing anything on the screen and you're just listening, and it would have to be just that you're listening to. I still love radio programs, so I'm really into this one. Bob Lurie's daughter shared this photograph with me. Stephanie Turner shared it. This is the only photo that I actually have, other than those ones from the brochure, from the American Jewish Hour. And you can see how fantastic this is. There's, all the people who are going to play the parts. You've got the people running the tech stuff back in the window. You can see the piano there. So there would have been live music, but there were also recorded music that was being done. And you see everybody's got their scripts in their hands, and heaven help you if you drop everything, you got to get out of order with it. But I'm sure it was great fun. I also find it amazing that I'm don't have to come in these days. So I usually come in jeans. But these people are really dressed up, and they're on the radio, which I find really, really cute. So the first thing in the collection that you encounter when you open the scripts is what they call the run of show. And the run of show usually just says, okay, these are the things that are going to be covered today. And this is for not only Lurie, but everybody else who's on the cast, so that they know what's going to happen when. And you can see, there are different people who are going to be talking. It gives you when there's going to be music, when there's going to be a break, when there's going to be a tribute, when there's, various things. You can see Al Fleischman pops in and out. And then you see the timing on it. So when they would go through these rehearsals, they would realize, oh, well, what we had thought was going to take 5 minutes only took 4, or what we thought was only going to take 3 minutes actually took 5. And so they had to adjust. And you can see that they're even breaking it down to the seconds. on the right-hand side of that one from 1950. And then things get written in, which looks like a map of my mind sometimes, but this is really detailed on how to get everything that they wanted to show, or excuse me, everything they wanted to present in the time that they had. This is the first script from the first 2 pages from the first script that we have from March 2nd, 1947. And you can see it's just the introduction of it. There's a theme music. Avery Bush says, "The American Jewish Hour, a program of variety in word and melody designed for your listening pleasure." Then Bob Lurie comes in, and this is sort of typical of these kind of scripts. It's very, very comfortable for a listener. Hiya, everybody. This is your host, Bob Lurie, saying hello and welcome to a grand half hour of Jewish gems. Gems of music, literature, drama, of history and current life, of service to humanity and goodwill. That's just sort of that okay, we're all sitting together in our living rooms and we're going to all listen to all this program on a Sunday afternoon at 12:30. The second page, you can see they've just done a music interlude, and then there's this ad, and it's for Pioneer white sliced bread. Just think about it. We're talking white sliced bread, and it's from the Northwest Baking Company, and it's grand for you. It's grand for mom and pop and for the whole family. It's wholesome and nourishing too, and it's made with vegetables and shortening and milk. And look for it in that blue and white Pioneer white bread package. So there's these ads that they're not brought in from elsewhere. They actually submitted the ads and they read them on the air. So if you're looking for those little gems of what was happening in St. Louis, not only as a community or in political spheres or in business, this is a different way to look at it, of what actually people were selling and people were hopefully buying. I just included this one because this is from that same script, and you can see that we're going on to page 10 already on it. But I included this for 2 reasons. One is that on the left side, you see that there's this little vignette that is included from Rabbi Lyons, and it's about Purim. So there's this little thing, and then you can see on the page 10 up above, again, it's another one of these little short ads. Don't forget, let's go to Schinberg's 20th Century Supermarkets. So you want to make sure that you go to there too, because they're one of the sponsors, and you want to make that plug for them. As I mentioned before, with about 8 cubic feet of phonograph records that we have, music was a big part of this program. Sometimes there would be a musical interlude where it would just be, we're going to play this piece of music and here you go. And it allowed them to have a break, grab a glass of water, before the next part of it came along. It was also because it had this incredible breadth to it. You see here that this is a piece from a cantor singing this piece, but there's every kind of music that you can imagine in this collection. There's Yiddish folk music, there is dance music, there's cantors singing, there's even some pop music from the 1940s and 50s, some big band music. It sort of runs the gamut of it. So the music sometimes was an interlude, but it was also part of other programmings, and I'll talk more about that in just a minute, but a lot of music. There was also poetry, for those who like poetry. This happened to be one about Father's Day, or for Father's Day. And again, I just mentioned about the music. You can see that there's music that begins it. He does a couple of the stanzas, and then there's another musical piece, and then more of the poetry, and then more music, and it just keeps going like that. So it would be this delightful sort of combination, artistic presentation of poetry and music, and a good tribute to Dad. And there's even a mention of moms in there. So this is the kind of thing that you'll find periodically in the collection. This is one of my, I can't keep saying it's one of my favorite parts of the collection, but I always like to see what kind of humorous things that they have in the collection. And this might be a little hard to read, but it's basically about a gentleman named Herschel who stopped at an inn to spend the night. And there were no other guests at the time. The innkeeper was away, and only his wife was there to receive Herschel. I'm half dead with hunger. Do give me something to eat. Looking at his shabby clothes, the woman thought to herself, this man is a tramp. Why take the chance to feed him? So she says, oh, I'm very sorry, my good man, but there isn't a drop of food in the house. What? No food? In that case, I'm afraid I'll just have to do what my father did. What did your father do? Never mind what my father did. My father did what he did. What in heaven's name could this man's father have done? It's a bad business, me all alone with him in the house. Who can tell? His father may have been a murderer, and if he threatens to do what his father did, good heavens. Without a word, she set the table and served Herschel all manner of good things. Herschel was so hungry he ate like a wolf, and when he finished, he smacked his lips and said, I haven't eaten such a good dinner since Passover. Seeing that the stranger was in good mood, the woman asked timidly, be so kind and tell me, what was it that your father did? Oh, my father? Well, whenever my father didn't have any supper, he went to bed without it. Now you're supposed to all laugh at that. That's the wit and humor in the program. Of course, it's better, I'm sure, when other people read it, but you can see the kind of things that they included, a little bit of something for everybody. A big part of the program was about announcements for the community. This is something that, as a historian, I'm very interested in trying to, when I get the time, to really dig in, because there's all sorts of hidden information inside here about these little, what it looks like little announcements, and they came in all sorts of forms. Sometimes they were written out, sometimes it came in a letter, sometimes, like you can see on the right, excuse me, on the left, it's a published pamphlet that came. This one happened to come to Bob Lurie's wife. And sometimes it's just somebody obviously just called in and somebody wrote it down very quickly so that they could read it on the air. These three examples are often how they show up if they're not one of those other forms, like a handwritten one or something. So you see something about Hanukkah, that there's going to be something that's going to be done. You see that there's a big event that's going to happen at the Kiel Auditorium about Israel government bonds. And then on the right, Hesed Shel Emeth is going to dedicate their new shul at Gannon and North and South. And that was in March of 1952. So these little gems are sort of hidden throughout this enormous collection. And if, you know, we have enough time in life, we're going to go through it and try to find all these little nuggets that exist in it. But you can imagine this is how people would get their information, you know, that there were things going on. And yes, by 52, the Jewish light existed. And yes, there would probably be other forms of people getting this information. But for a lot of people, listening to the radio was how they found out what these things were that were going on. Just like the Today Show, there would be a get well list presented often. So people who have just gotten out of the hospital, or people who were still in the hospital and they were wishing them well. Sometimes it's not just the names, sometimes they'll give a little bit more information about the person. And again, these are sort of sprinkled throughout the collection. There were also what I call special segments that existed. This one that I just put up because it's kind of unusual is about the music of Israel. And that's what the program was called. And so it talks about all kinds of different types of music and who was presenting it and whether it was a folk song or patriotic or whatever it was. Then you can see on this script that there's music that is played in between. So the announcer, probably Bob Lurie, would talk about it, then they'd play a piece of music, and then there would be more of it. And this is 49. Also, they did this program, which is probably, this is one I want to pull out so that we can use it for other things. This is about the creation of the state of Israel. So this was done very early on, and a new nation is born. And you can see that there are different voices that are narrating what was this whole program is about. Again, there's some musical interludes, there's a narrator, there's voices, there's all of this. So it's got this movement going on to it to keep people's attention, and you learn something about it all. It's truly amazing. Special tributes like Camp Hawthorne, if you want to know about the early thing. And again, it's presented not as somebody sitting there reading a paper, but different voices, different people talking about this and narrating it in a way that it's more like a drama or a play to keep people's interest up. Children's Story Hour, they often had that one. This one is called Barak the Red Pony. I can't wait I have not read all of these, verbatim, but this one grabbed my attention in part because there are so many sound effects that they use in this one. You can see that the very first, there's a whinny, there are hoof prints that are somebody's either doing or they're playing off of those phonograph albums. There's up-tempo music, there's conversations, there's narration. And especially for little kids, I mean, how wonderful. I'm over 65, but I find this really fun. I don't have to be a kid to enjoy it. Community calendar, again, the whole what was going on, when it was going on. Here you see all kinds of things about the Epstein Hebrew Academy. There's something going on at Rabbi Truckman's congregation on Blackstone. There's the 40th anniversary of the yeshiva, just on and on and on. So all of these little tidbits, all of these little nuggets are involved in this. And I can just imagine people sitting around and saying, oh no, what was that? Did he say that was at 6 o'clock or did he say that was at 5 o'clock? And hopefully that there was other ways to find that information out. Probably the most common handwritten information in the files is about interviews. I would say that at least, it's probably not every week, but certainly maybe once or twice a month, there was a big interview that was done. This one happened to be done by with a gentleman named Bill Slater, who was with Israel Bond Office. And there's never much information. And this is obviously what Bob Lurie was going from. So somebody would jot down some very basic information for him so that he would know what this person was associated with and what he was supposed to do. And you can see that basically he's got his first line right there. Bill, what brings you to St. Louis? And then they would go from there so that everybody could hear the interview. And the person was right there. It wasn't like they were coming from elsewhere or it was a phone interview. Yeah. They had two large repeating segments that happened at least from 47 to 54. One was called A Tribute to Greatness. The other one was called Men Who Build the Community. And the tribute to greatness wasn't just about men. It wasn't just about individuals. Sometimes it could be an organization. Here I've just thrown up two of them. One is Bizet, and the other one is Golda Meirson or Golda Meir. And again, it's not like like a history lecture. It's more of a conversation that is scripted, that people, when they're listening to it, they hear these different voices. They hear it more treated more as a story, like you're reading a book, but you're listening to it, obviously, instead of reading it. That way there's music, there's some narration, again, there's some sound effects like applause and things like that. And you get to hear and visualize these people and what it was that made them, in at least in their estimation, great, and the contributions that they made. And they're really wide ranging, and not all Jewish either. Men Who Build Community, I just pulled this one out. This is Abe Levin's from 1951. And again, this one is a little more narration that's involved, and not necessarily the idea of like a radio play. It is more of a narration, but it gives you a good indication of the historical information that is in here, which for me and for the archives, especially when people are asking for certain pieces of information, this is a really good go-to to see what it was at that time, in this case, 1951, why this person was important to the community. One of the most fun things that they did on this radio program, and they did on most radio programs at the time, if you had the pleasure of listening to them in the late 40s and early 50s, were dramatizations and radio plays. This one, the script here is called Adolf to Antiochus, and it's a conversation between Adolf Hitler and Antiochus. And they're having this discussion about things, about free people, and about them being infamous. And it's basically for Hanukkah, but it's done as this dramatization. And again, you've got different people, you've got the sound effects, somebody sneezes, it's Antiochus here. And there's all kinds of music and various things like that. And then you see a clip there that from that promotional brochure of the whole cast presenting one of these radio plays or dramas. These also ran the gamut too. This one happens to be a play about Queen Esther, about Purim, and again, there's narration, there are people who play the different parts, and it takes only about 3 or 4 minutes to do the whole thing. It would be really fun if somebody would resurrect some of these and produce them, I think, for even modern presentations. I think that would be very fun to do, just listening to them. So, you've been listening to the American Jewish Hour, brought to you by the Northwest Baking Company, Raskus Dairy Products, and Schindberg's 20th Century Supermarkets. This is Avery Bush. And then Bob Lurie says, and Bob Lurie, expressing the hope that you enjoyed listening to the American Jewish Hour. Send your comments, suggestions, requests, and organizational news to the American Jewish Hour, station KXLW, Clayton 5, Missouri. Don't forget, this is your program, designed to entertain and serve you, and made possible by the fine products and services represented in the name Northwest, Raskus, and Schindberg. Be sure to tune in next week, same time, same station, when the American Jewish Hour will return to you. And then it goes on. So it only ran 12 years, and that might seem like a very short amount of time, you know, in the big scheme of history, but that's a really long time for a radio program, for any type of a program. Think of even television programs or movies or serial movies or TV dramas that you like, and most of them don't last 12 years. This was an amazing production. It was well done. It was well thought out. It was well researched. And someday I hope to get some of those digitized. And if so, I'll come back and share some of them with you so that you can actually hear them rather than having to just read it. And I think I'll take some questions. And if I can't answer, I do believe that there are some family members on the call. And I'd love to know if any of you actually got to listen to the American Jewish Hour and what your memories are of it. Thank you.
Diane, why don't you stop the share so we can all see each other?
Yep.
So we have a question from Rabbi Stifman. What a treasure source of St. Louis Jewish history was a comment. Let's see.
That it is.
So do we have more questions? Any questions? We have Harvey Schneider. Do you have a question? And then John Reichman, did you have one after
Yes.
Harvey? No. Okay.
My question is that the radio stations which featured the program are what I may refer to as second-rate stations, certainly not the most popular ones at that time. Is there any history which reflects on why that occurred?
Well, they might not have been the most popular, but you've got to remember, even WEW, I believe, was the second radio station in the US. It was the first radio station west of the Mississippi. So they might not have been KSD or one of those, or KMOX later on, but they were probably in that sort of more, what we would today call, you called it second tier, I would call it talk radio. So they weren't the big ones that were doing, that had lots and lots of money, but that's because they didn't have lots and lots of money. But if you've got 85% of the listening market listening to you, there's a good lot of people that are tuning in, regardless of the radio station.
So do we have, yeah, Stephanie, please unmute yourself.
There she is.
Hi, everybody. So I'm Stephanie. A lot of you know me, and I thank you all for being here today. It's Stephanie Lurie Turner, and if you saw a little dark curly-haired girl in a couple of the pictures, that was me. I used to do the show with my dad, and we were buddies. And when I met Diane, really by a fluke, my mother had donated she had saved and had donated all of the scripts, what do you call them, Diane? Those big round
transcription discs. Yeah.
Yeah. And I have some more for you. I have some on tape, actually. My son found, Mark, who's on the call here. And my mom thought they had been lost, actually, after she donated them to the J. And Diane and I met by fluke. There's karma in this world. We were at something at the Holocaust, and she and I were just standing and talking. I didn't know her. She didn't know me. And that's how this whole conversation, and she's taken a passion with this. And I am just forever grateful to her for doing this. Many of you knew my dad as young adults. My dad did develop Parkinson's in his 60s, but and that kind of took away the man many of you knew. But he gave so much to the Jewish community of St. Louis, and I had the good fortune of being able to go with him a lot. My brother, by the way, is also on this call. Bruce Lurie, and I see some couple of my cousins, some of my cousins from all over the country. So thank you all. But you asked about the radio station, and I remember us going to KXLW. We were on right after Spider Burke, who was a Black, very popular newscaster, disc jockey. I don't know what you want to call him, but that station seemed to handle more variety of things like that. It wasn't necessarily a totally Black station. Yeah. And I don't know why he ended up on those stations. It probably did have to do with money. It was a Sunday morning, and everybody tuned in. And I just remember, even as a kid, people would say to me, "Are you related to Bob Lurie?" And I go, "He's my dad." I mean, to me, he was my dad. And people were everybody seemed to love him. And to this day, people will stop me and they talk about my dad. They remember sitting with their families around the radio on a Sunday morning, listening to the American Jewish Hour. I see John Reichman bobbing his head up and down. And it's true. so much a part of everyone's life. And he loved the people that were part of the show. Haskell Schwartzberg, Genevieve Bierman are two people I specifically remember. I probably have more pictures. My mom passed away in 2020. She was 100, and she would have loved this, absolutely loved this. And although we've gone through a lot of her stuff, there's still boxes and boxes, boxes of photos and things. And so I'm going to try and get more stuff together. And if anybody wants to ask me something, I don't know if I can answer it on a personal level because I was a kid, but I do remember a lot of it. Bruce, I don't know if he's able to talk right now from where he is, but I did see his name on here. And I mean, we would be happy to try to answer anything that we could. Actually, Diane knows more than I do sometimes about this.
I saw that you mentioned Haskell Schwartzberg. So
yes,
my parents were friends with him and his wife. They belonged to a club called the Medics, which met at the YMCH or HA. But anyway, and he had a beautiful voice, I remember, very deep, whatever. So what was his, what did he do on the program?
He was always one of the main characters when they did the scripts. I mean, and Diane's right, we did scripts that had to do with, I remember I was once Beatrice B, and I think I was in the garden of, maybe it was King Solomon. So I had child's parts and funny little parts, but Haskell did have this beautiful speaking voice, and he was one of the lead. They always had a script, and it might have had to do with a person like Golda Meir, Henrietta Zold. It were just a lot of different kinds of people. He always usually took the lead male part, and Genevieve was usually the lead female part. Some people came and went over the years, but they were the two main people. And you know that here I was a little kid, and they always treated me like I was one of them. So they're very near. I've lost touch. I mean, I'm sure they're gone now, but I've lost touch in my heart. I've lost touch with them, but they were always in my heart.
You were like their little Shirley Temple.
Well, yeah, that would have been nice. But, but you know what? Yes, I have to say, growing up, it was very special. It really, I didn't know. I grew up in a Jewish community. You know, we all kind of did. I went to Hamilton School when it was basically Jewish, and then we moved to U City, which was basically Jewish. I didn't know that I was a minority most of the time, but my dad was really good about. He wanted me to know about other people and other religions. And he always said, I love to say this line. He always said, Stephanie, people are people wherever you go. They have 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 arms, 2 legs, a nose and a mouth, and they go to the bathroom just like you and me. And that's how I was raised my whole life, was to treat people as people. And if you didn't like them, you didn't like them because they just weren't people you liked. It had nothing to do with race or religion or sexual. Well, nobody talked about sexual preferences back in those days, but it didn't have to do with anything else other than what kind of a person you were. And when I went away to college at Mizzou, that made a lot of difference in my life, because for the first time, I really spent a lot of time with people who'd never seen a Jewish person.
Oh, Stephanie, you froze up. So Kathleen Sitzer, I believe.
Person before. If you were Catholic, weird, because most of the people, and I credit my dad with that, because I was the eye opener for that. So that was just the way we lived our lives. But he did travel the world. He was involved with now the NAACP. He of course went back and forth to Israel. You mentioned that they founded Brentwood Travel, and it was because my dad really was traveling back and forth to Israel. He was involved in the formation of the state of Israel. All of this was happening, and that was very important to him. His family, the Lurie family, actually initially came from what was Palestine, and he moved from Russia or Latvia when he was a small boy. But that was very near and dear to his heart, anything to do with Israel and the state of Israel. So they'd gone back and forth so many times. Then my mom began to go with him. That's how it really became the start of Brentwood Travel, and taking people on trips around the world. And they'd go for 6 and 7 weeks at a time, and then they'd end up in Israel. It didn't matter if the groups were Jewish or non-Jewish. They all went to Israel. He was determined that everyone would know. Well, today Israel is definitely much more ecumenical in terms of the population, but back then it was, they were fighting for it to be the Jewish state. And so they spent a lot of time educating people about Israel as well, and on the American Jewish Hour.
I think one of the things that surprised me the most when I started researching all of this was, and beyond what was in the collection is that if you Google Robert Lurie, or if you go to newspapers.com and pull him up in whatever context, the American Jewish Hour is a very small part of his life. There are lots and lots of articles, lots and lots of things about all the things that he was involved in, which makes you realize the man must have been busy all the time, but he seemed to enjoy everything that he did, whether it was working for dealing with the state of Israel, or bond drives, or the American Jewish Congress, or whatever entity it was that he was working with. And then he had this, and you saw how involved and how extensive the research and the writing and the rehearsals and all of that was for this program. I'm glad he had you with him, Stephanie, because I don't know that you'd ever seen him other than that. He was so busy all the time.
He was gone a lot. He traveled a lot. But I don't know, I see Ronnie Brockman on the call, and my mom and her mom were friends. And so, Ronnie I was her camp counselor, but she reminds me of that all the time. But seriously, I mean, I think, maybe some of the people on the call remember seeing my dad, but he was gone a lot. But family was hugely important to him. And he loved his family. And he never did anything for money. He did it for love. He was just a man who was passionate about certain things in his life. And
Kathleen's sister has her hand up. So Kathleen, do you have a question?
Well, I have a comment. I apologize. I came into the call late because I was on another call. But I came in, Judy, when you were talking about, or I guess Diane, you were talking about the fact that there are all these scripts, and wouldn't it be great if they could be presented somewhere? Well, you know what? You're talking to me. That's my background, producing theater, and perhaps we could get together and find some place to turn these into staged readings. It wouldn't be a radio play, or on TV or anything, but they could be staged readings that people could either come to see, or they could be done on Zoom. So Diane, if you want to contact me about that, please do.
Thank you, Kathleen. That's a really
I think
generous
that some of these are
idea.
so cute and so interesting. Some of the kids things, and some of the more the things about some of the tributes and everything, but certainly the dramas are just fantastic. They would be great to do.
Great.
Karen?
We'll talk.
Thank you.
We'll talk. All right.
And I know Jordan Palmer is very interested in doing a lot of this too, from the Jewish Light. So
Karen, Karen Edinger?
Hi,
Please
Karen.
say-
Hi, Stephanie. Karen Snitzer, how are you?
yeah, I knew it was you.
So I apologize. I had to get up to take a phone call. I don't know if someone asked this yet or not, but who did the writing? Did your dad do the writing?
That's a good question. I do think he wrote a lot of the scripts. I don't know that he wrote all of them.
I have names of a couple of writers that I encountered throughout things. Sam Coleman, I believe, was one, and David Froelich was one. So that there were various ones. I do think that at least, sometimes on the script it would have at the end someone's initials or somebody's notes on it. So that might be a key to who it was who did the research and who wrote the script or wrote that particular piece. So that might help us at some point track down some of these individuals. And
That'd
maybe
be
more of the
huge.
information that you have, Stephanie, would help fill in those blanks also.
Yeah, I don't remember all the details on that, honestly. And
I'm
maybe
actually Robert's granddaughter. And when you said the name Sam Kalman, I went to grade school, actually where I am right now, I'm a teacher where I went to grade school, but I went to grade school with Tyra Kalman, whose dad, I believe, was Sam Kalman. And I remember he was much older, so he probably was closer to my grandfather's age. And I remember her mother telling me that that her father worked with my grandfather and what a great guy he was. So I know I'm friends with her on Facebook. I could easily reach out.
Oh,
and see if
reach out. Cy Becker
didn't
was
remember
another
that.
name that
Yeah.
came up as one of the script writers.
Okay.
Bill Livingston, you want to unmute yourself, please?
Part of my question was answered maybe as to who did the research on all of it, but also it said on all the music, it'll say number 804 or whatever. Do you know what those related to?
Well, you know, the time has not necessarily been kind to some of the sleeves that the records, the albums, the LPs are in. And so sometimes when by the time I got them, they weren't in them. Some of them actually have a number and a grease pencil on the label itself. So I have a feeling that if it said like 406 or whatever, it ties into that. The easiest thing is if they actually told the name of the piece of music, and that would help track that down from what it was. Some of them, we don't have numbers on them. So it's just a matter of guessing what it was if it's not actually mentioned what the title was on the piece. But it is quite an extensive collection. Unfortunately, you know, the copyright issues with music is just daunting. So while I would love to include some of that without spending an awful lot of time finding out if it's still under copyright or somebody else picked up the copyright, a lot of the music we would not be able to digitize and to use, but which is unfortunate. But
I think that would really depend. This is Mark, grandson. You know, a lot of stuff becomes public domain after a while. And,
unless somebody else picked up the copyright. Yep.
Right. And yes, but you know, you can get permissions, and this it's old, you know, they don't bother like it's something today, like The Weekend, you know, you're not playing some modern stuff. So it might not be as big a deal or cost as much to get to play it or whatever, but you know, and
Also, I think Mark, on top of that, for educational purposes, if you get it listed,
educational
you know,
purposes.
being in education, that you can get some slide on that.
You can play a certain amount of it, and then you're talking about it afterward. It's okay. They do a lot of on YouTube. People like doing the reactions to certain songs from the 70s or whatever, and they're allowed to play portions of it without worrying about the copyright because they're not just playing the whole thing and putting it out there. They're kind of commenting on it and going, "Whoa, that song's great." So, plus we could do those radio shows on YouTube. You could create those instead of a live rereading of the dramatic thing. Somebody could create it and we could put it on YouTube, create a YouTube channel that people can go to and, you know, check out those dramas and scripts.
That would be fun.
Let's get this pandemic over so that you guys can all come in and look at this material, because right now it's under lockdown, just like we are.
Yeah.
Oh.
I'll try to get those tapes to get those digitized, and I've got a whole bunch of slides I'm trying to scan
Oh,
from
fantastic.
things he took over the years.
Put
from
him to
Israel
work,
and all of them.
Diane.
All right. I can't retire anytime soon, that's for sure.
And all of you are welcome to help too.
John Reichman, you have something?
So Eunice wasn't able to make it here, unfortunately, because she has told me many
Freezing.
a religious meeting that they did not miss, along with much of that Jewish community, the weekly broadcasts. And she would also mention that her grandfather, Noah Sauls, was the subject of one of those personal broadcasts, you know, about his life. He was the publisher of the Jewish, I think they called it the Jewish Record here in St. Louis. And there was a recording floating around here somewhere, I've heard it, of this tribute to him. I think it must have been his obituary or when he passed away. And it started with very solemn music and about the life of Noah Sauls. And it was very dramatic, just as you described. And I know it's around here, so that we could, I don't know if the archives have that or not, but I think we could get that to you.
That would be fun.
Fantastic.
So we're getting close to time. Do we have any more questions for the last 5 minutes?
Can I ask a question for everybody?
Yes.
Does anybody remember listening to it on Sunday? Yeah, I see a couple of hands going. I know Stephanie did. What was your feelings for listening to it? Why did you listen to it? I see Willard raised his hand. Oh, you're on mute, dear.
Willard,
Well, turn your mute off.
oh.
We're in different rooms in the
Okay.
same house. Unmute yourself.
There you
he
go.
goes.
My father was definitely an Orthodox Jewish person, and he instilled to me that I should have an interest in listening to the show on Sundays, and I did periodically listen to it throughout the years. It was really just uplifting. It was exciting. I don't remember too much about it. I was only about 11 or 12 years old, maybe less than that, I don't know. But it was just exciting to hear it. And that's it.
And I saw somebody else's hand. Myron down there, I see him waving his hand.
Yep, Myron, need to unmute. Myron, unmute.
Sorry to say, I never listened to the program, but Steph, when we were running around in junior high school together, I had no idea that your father was a radio celebrity or whatever. And when we were friends, I just knew that, you know, you, like all of our other friends, we had 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, what you were saying before. And, you know, we just got along and we were just, companions, you know. So, you know, it was good to be friends with you back then too.
Thank you.
And now.
Where's Rabbi Stiffman?
His picture's not on. He's here though. Barbara Becker, did you raise your hand? Oh, there's Rabbi Stiffman. You want to unmute yourself?
No, I just could say that I came here in 1965. It was years after the program, but a lot of people still talked about it. And of course, knowing Stacy and all the generations of her family and being impressed by her mother, Bob Lurie's name was always very much on the minds of a lot of St. Louis Jews.
He would have liked you, Rabbi Stiffman.
Who doesn't like him?
I'll give you a list.
Oh, okay. Maybe that's a private conversation then.
Well, I want to say Ronnie Brockman had to leave the program because she had to go pick up her grandson, but she wanted to, they were the associate on the program today, and we wanted to give St. Louis Kaplan Feldman Holocaust Museum a shout out because they were part of this. They were our support. So on behalf of Ronnie, thank you everyone for being here today. And I don't see any additional questions at the moment, but thank you, Diane. Thank you so much for giving us a wonderful program and everyone for being here today.
And when we open back up, please come and visit the archives. We'll be in a new space with actual research facilities. So come and look at all the goodies we have.
And thank you, Stephanie, for giving us so much information today about your family and the program. And, you know, maybe in the future, if we get these little tidbits together that people were mentioning, we'll have another program.
Sounds good.
Thank you, everybody. My dad would have been so thrilled to see all of you.
Judith,
Bye.
Susan has a good question in chat.
Susan asked about government regulation, and I honestly have no idea.
Okay.
I really have no
Was
idea.
the radio show regulated by the government at the time? Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it was, but not something that I know right off the top of my head.
I have no idea. I can't even imagine that I ever heard anything like that, but
Well,
things have
especially
changed
not
a
in the
lot.
early
Thank you,
years, I
Susan.
would think not.
Oh, that was a good question, but do we have any others here? Let's see. Andrea says it would be wonderful to have another program and hear the show itself. So maybe we can somehow work that out,
We
Diane.
will
Wouldn't
try.
that be
Let me
fun?
get the museum open, the
Stephanie.
new Holocaust Museum open, and then we'll go
So-
to the others. So we'll do that.
All right. Thank you everyone again for being here today. We had a great program. Thank you, Diane, on behalf of the Holocaust Museum. Have a good
Thank you all,
afternoon.
Jewish Community Archives too. We'll see you all the next time.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.